Merrill's still in the Valley Conference, though, right?
For some sports.
Okay,
because we used to. I forget which year it was in high school, but we played Spash for like homecoming or the week before homecoming. It was brutal. It was brutal.
Yeah. What year did you graduate from high school?
2007.
2007. Okay.
Yeah, it was bad, but that's still when we played you guys.
Yeah.
Or Spash, I should say.
Yeah.
So, Team Early as Fuck podcast. We've got Jeremy Solon in the studio here. Got all the maple syrup. We're sipping on some fresh sap, which is fantastic. I'm so excited.
Good stuff.
I'm gonna get all jittery. I've got a red eye coffee and I've got sap. I'm gonna be all fired up.
You are. You're set to go.
Boom. So, Jeremy, spring. 'Tis the season. I really enjoy the Tappening as an event name. I'm looking at that right now.
Yeah.
I'll pull that up so everyone can see it. It's sold out. If you want to tickets, too bad.
That's right.
It's sold out.
Got to get on that earlier.
Oh man, that's such a great name.
I think my brother-in-law should be credited with that name. We struggled with the name for quite a while. And
is this going to be a annual thing, you think?
Yeah, I hope so. We'll see. This is kind of a crazy brainchild, of mine to do a dinner in the woods, and it's a little crazy to do in spring. There's a lot of unpredictability about spring, and we've been pretty anxious about it. So we'll see. We have an amazing team of folks putting it on. The chef, Dan Solberg from Stack Farm and Foods, is amazing, and Zach Stringer and doing cocktails, and Sarah Crow doing music. So we have this amazing team of people.
Oh, Sarah's gonna be there.
Yeah,
sweet.
Yeah. So that's been amazing, and that's decreased the anxiety level, but the anxiety over weather is a little crazy. And just a week ago there was 2 feet of snow in the woods where we were planning to hold this, and so we were like, can we actually make this happen or not? Fortunately, the snow's gone down quite a bit, and I think it's going to work out perfectly. But so we hope to do it every year, but we'll see how we survive this one and go from there. So
sweet.
Yeah.
So we've got. Oh man, where do we even want to start with this? Let's just keep talking about this Tappening thing quick for a second here.
Yeah.
So Stacked Farms, where is that out of?
Yeah, they're actually out of Nishkoro is where their farm is. But Dan has great connections here. He was a student here on campus, worked with Tony Whitefeather. That's when I got to know him, when he was here on campus. And then was a chef with lots of amazing people and worked on amazing farms. Joe Salatin, Tori Miller down in Madison, and started their own place, a few years ago, and he's a, sustainable polyculture farmer, and the stack idea comes from, their stacking kind of functions on the land and in their business. So they do catering, grow a lot of the meat that they use, so hogs and cattle, and then are doing a bunch of crops as well. So pretty amazing family, amazing chef, and so it's pretty always great when you get to find someone who has kind of shared values and can put all that into practice in amazing food. And we're pretty fortunate in this area to have several of those folks.
That's unreal what we have available to us.
Yeah, exactly. And Dan and I have worked together the last few years on a dinner that we did for the Point of Discovery School, a fundraising dinner for them, and decided to take it up a level this year and kind of go full on maple with the Tappening and hold it in the woods.
Full send.
Yeah. So
you're gonna have like mature gobblers like strutting through the middle of the dinner, attacking people.
That would be impressive. Yeah, we'll get a couple deer to run through.
Yeah. For sure.
Yeah,
for sure. Barrel just show up like, hey, that smells good.
Yeah, right.
I'm hungry. I've been sleeping all winter.
Right. That's an amazing thing about bears, like that I can't quite figure out. We never see them during maple syrup season.
Yeah.
Even when we cooked syrup in the woods, we never had bear issues. And I was always just like, they got it. Like they're waking up at this point. Like, why don't they just like rip into this stuff?
Yep.
But it's never happened. It's always amazing to me.
That is crazy. I was actually just curious about that because like up where they're allowed to like use fresh bait in some places, like they cook sugar in the woods. They're like, this is how we get the bears to show up.
Exactly. And for some reason in the spring it's not of interest, or you know, something's just off, but
they're just still groggy,
or
they're busy eating all the spring dead animals that are like thawing out.
Exactly.
Found plenty of those up north. I want to say within the first 3 miles of snowshoeing we found 4 dead deer.
Oh really?
I'm like, this has been a brutal winter.
It was short and intense. But yeah, it was pretty rough.
It was rough there for a bit.
Yeah.
So, Jeremy, the tapped maple syrups. Where does this all start for you? What was? So where are you from? Let's go. Young Jeremy.
Way back. Yeah.
Let's bring it all together.
Yeah. So I grew up in the woods north of Anigo, basically. So my dad and my uncle were loggers and farmers, and you know, one of the kind of spring rituals was making maple syrup, and so it was that transition time between winter logging and, you know, summer farming and logging. So as long as I can remember, basically, we were, you know, trudging into the woods to make maple syrup in the spring. And actually, some of my earliest memory of maple syrup is in my grandma's kitchen on the farm, gathering up the metal coffee cans, like
that you've just been stockpiling all winter.
Just been stockpiling all winter, and pounding a nail like into them to create a hole so that we could put wire on that we would then wire onto the spouts, and then kind of gathering all those up together, walking out to the woods, which was about a quarter mile away through the field, with my dad and uncle with a brace and bit, and you know, drilling holes. And you know, as however old I was, like 6, 7, something like that, I remember my uncle or my dad saying like, all right, it's your turn to, you know, put a tap in. And I was like, oh, okay. You know, I'd watched him do that. It looked easy enough. And, you know, a few cranks in, I was like, no, your turn.
This is a workout.
I didn't realize it was that much work. So it started there. I always loved, you know, being in the woods that time of year. I love the process of, you know, pulling out sap that's pretty much like water with just a little bit of sweetness, and watching that, you know, cook. And the other thing I think that really got me hooked was when we would clean the maple syrup at the end of the year, there was always this like just this junk you kind of pulled out of it that was a little bit of crystallized sugar and stuff floating in it and all that stuff, and it'd always just be in a pile like on the counter. I would gather all that stuff up and like stuff it in baggies, and I'd take that to school. So I was like, you know, the sugar daddy in school. Like all my friends were gathered around and they were munching on, you know, probably the grossest stuff that you could pull out, but it was tasty. So yeah, I mean, just lots of great memories growing up. And so I did that, you know, all the while I was home. At some point, like probably early in my high school years, my dad and uncle got into commercial scale production a little bit. We tapped, like one year we were planning to tap like 1,000 trees, and it was a year actually very similar to this year in some ways, where it's a ton of snow. We were tapping like waist deep snow. And then in the course of a few days, all that snow was gone. It was like 70 degrees and didn't really ever cool down. But they just bought this evaporator, like huge investment into maple syrup production. So like, we'll just keep tapping trees, and you know, we'll only get a little bit out of each tree, but at least we'll get some. And so we ended up tapping like close to 2,000 trees that year.
Oh wow!
And made like a tiny bit of maple syrup out of a lot of trees.
Yeah, that's not good weather.
So we did that for a while, and then after I left for college, I wasn't, you know, really involved in the process, and we moved away. Lived in Minnesota. And
where did you go to college?
So I started in Minnesota, Duluth.
Okay.
Went there to play baseball, and then came down back to Stevens Point. I came to Stevens Point, finished school after some elbow surgery and other problems. You know, got refocused on what I was going to do with the rest of my life after the baseball dream was gone. So finished undergrad here, water resources, and then went to grad school in Duluth. And both my wife Abby and I, we got married before grad school, went to grad school there. We were up there for a couple of years, and then moved out to the state of Oregon for a few years. Lived in Bend in Portland, and then 2003.
What were you, so in water resources? What were you doing?
Environmental education. So my master's degree is in environmental ed, and I did a bunch of odd jobs for a while in Oregon. We were living in like the most difficult place for young people to get started, which was Bend, Oregon, like booming. Either came there independently wealthy or, you know, like scraped by doing whatever you could do because it was a beautiful, amazing place to live. But I had the best job I'll probably ever have there, except for making maple syrup. Maybe I was a mountain guide for a while, doing snowshoe tours and hiking tours and all kinds of stuff. Did after school programs, you know, all kinds of stuff. And then I finally worked at the High Desert Museum running school programs. And then in Portland, I did forestry education stuff.
I had no idea because I know you as the maple syrup guy.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And like you're on like boards and talking about like local farming, local kind of environmental work, and kind of creating this better network for food and farming. Yeah. So that's what I know you as. I didn't know you as the outdoor ed guy.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's my, you know, career in a sense. So I've worked in programs, Oregon, Minnesota, Oregon, Wisconsin, nationally. So I'm just wrapping up a position with Think Water, which was a national water education effort funded by USDA, and that work was done through UW Extension. So I did that for a few years. Before that, I was at UW Stevens Point running environmental education programs, the school forest program, which you're familiar with from Merrill. So I coordinated that statewide 4-H,
program. I was out there all the time. I love that place.
Yep. Mary Wendorf, who you might remember. Yep. So she was one of the coordinators that I worked with really closely. But I ran that program at a statewide level for quite a few years, and then directed forestry education efforts at the statewide level, and then directed the Center for Environmental Education at UW Stevens Point for a few years. So yeah, that's that's my real job.
Hell yeah.
You know? That's what I get paid to do.
Appreciate your work, man. I spent a lot of time out there. My dad, he like his college, one of his side gigs in college was taxidermy. Okay. And he sold and donated a lot to school forest, like really? A lot of the stuff in the basement. Cool. Yeah, he cool. did a lot of those things.
Yeah, I've seen his work, I'm sure. Yeah,
very cool.
Yeah, so
what brought you back to Wisconsin?
Yeah, so anyway, I mean, that job as the school forest coordinator brought us back to Wisconsin, and that was we were just about to have our first
That
kid,
was my next question.
Yeah, Simon was born 3 weeks after we got moved back to Wisconsin or something like that.
What time of the year was this?
It was March. Yeah.
So
when we moved back, and he was born in April. Yeah.
So he was born in the sugar bush, I assume.
That would have been perfect. But so I hadn't been involved for quite a few years while we were out west. Occasionally, I'd get a maple syrup shipment, which was like my connection, which was pretty essential to my life, living away from the Midwest.
Right, having access to it, you take that stuff for granted.
That's right.
What out in Oregon is there a lot? Is there a lot of maple syrup?
No, I mean there is maple syrup, but it all comes from the Midwest and East Coast.
I guess that was my question. Do they do their own?
Yeah, there's in Oregon. I don't know if there's production. There is a little bit in the Northwest in Washington for sure. Mm-hmm. The trick is, so they're big leaf maple. You can produce maple from them. Okay. But they don't grow in many places where there's that alternating freeze thaw cycle. And so kind of on the edge of their kind of altitude range, at least in Washington, people are making a little bit of maple syrup out of there. But when I was out there, I'd never heard of it. It's only since I've been back that I've heard that they're making some syrup out there. But
so you're gonna have to forgive my ignorance on arborism and knowing my trees. That's one of my like outdoor goals for 2019 is to actually learn flora and fauna when I'm out in the woods, not just like that tree will work for a tree stand.
Yeah, right.
Or that's an oak tree. It has acorns.
Those are important things.
Yeah, right. I know like base level.
Yeah.
So
we can work on that.
Out there, the big leaf maple.
Yeah.
And then here we have more of sugar maple.
Yep. So we actually have 4 trees we can make syrup from here. Okay. Maple syrup, sugar maple or hard maple, red maple, which is often just called soft maple, silver maple, which is grows more down in river bottoms, and then box elder. So box elder is also a maple tree.
I did not know that.
Yeah, and so actually, Cirrus Whitefeather, Tony's son.
I just saw him.
Yeah, he's making syrup out of box elder, so he's kind of focused on that. And box elder generally has a lower sugar content. Sugar maple generally has the highest sugar content. We'll come back to that, but so it's a lot more work to make syrup out of box elder. But
because box elder they use for making like liqueurs, or can't you use it for fermenting?
Oh, maybe.
Box elder, I feel like.
Could be.
All right.
Yeah, I don't know about that
Just
one.
Just an alcoholic.
Yeah, yeah, right. So anyway, yeah, we can use any of the maple trees here. Sugar maple's preferred, just for kind of the sugar content and the flavor from it. But
yeah, and how old? I'm gonna get way off in the rabbit hole of maple. Now that I have you here, how old does a maple tree have to have before it can produce? And then like, what's the life cycle of that tree look like?
Yeah, so maples are amazing trees. They're long living trees. Generally, we say it's probably about 60 years before you can tap a tree.
Oh wow!
So like 8 to 10 inches in diameter.
Yeah.
And usually that takes somewhere around that time. The tricky part is
trees are awesome.
Yeah, sugar maples are maybe unique. We're learning more about forest function all the time. But one of the things we know about sugar maple is that they can be seedlings, like 6 feet to 2 feet tall for decades before they finally start to grow. And so what they do is once if the seed finds a good spot, they'll germinate, they'll sprout up, and their roots are actually interconnected with the bigger trees in the area. And so they just hang out there in the shade. They don't get enough sun to grow, but they're getting enough nutrients from the big trees that they can live.
Is that like the mycelium? That like
so that's they're connected through these fungal networks, right? And the big trees are basically sharing nutrients into those fungal networks, which are then shared with the little trees. And so there are some cases where I've read that it can be 50 years that a tree will be like a few inches tall. They'll just hang out there. And then
just stockpiling, getting ready.
Yeah, and then what they need is an opening in the canopy, right? So once a tree dies, another one, and they get sunlight, then they finally shoot up. So when we say 60 years, that could actually be 100 years or 150.
That's optimal.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
So we start there, at like an 8 to 10 inch tree. Sugar maple will live to be 250, 300 years old, kind of on the upper end. So that's a lot of years of tapping.
Yeah.
And
do you name trees?
We have some names.
Yeah. There's got to be generational names.
Yeah.
Trees that have been around forever or produce really well, or just aren't going to produce.
Yeah,
they're
exactly.
Stingy with their
sap.
sap.
Stingy. Yeah, they're always those, and it's always a mystery, which is part of the fun. Some years, trees run well, and individual trees, go crazy, and then the next year, just nothing going on, and you don't know why.
Yeah, I was going to just ask you about that. So what is so for people listening? And myself, because I'm obviously super novice. What's like optimal climate conditions?
Yeah.
Like weather.
Yeah. So generally the kind of ideal daily fluctuation is between say 45 degrees during the day and 25 at night. So a decent freeze, not too cold that it takes forever to warm up, so 25 is kind of what I say, and then kind of mid 40s. And some of the science isn't super well known, but what we know happens is that pressure builds up in the tree when it's cold.
Yep.
And that forces the sap out, basically. And so the fluctuation that's happening, we think, is that at night when it's cold, there are gases that are in the tree, mostly carbon dioxide, but other gases. And when it's cold, gases dissolve more readily into liquid, so that those gases dissolve into the sap. And then when they warm up during the day, they come out of solution and basically create this pressure in the tree. And that's what forces the sap out of the holes. So we know we need that fluctuation. We're not exactly sure of kind of the mechanism of it, but that's our kind of best guess at this point. But the thing that it does for the tree is when that pressure drops in the tree during the night, it's basically sucking water up from the ground, right?
Okay.
So up through the roots and into the tree itself. And then when that pressure builds up during the day, it's pushing that sap further into branches, like the extremities of the tree. So that it's kind of like your heart in some ways. Right?
That's
so
what I was just thinking.
It's pulling, that vacuum pulls blood into the heart, and then the pressure pushes it out into the body. And so that same kind of process is happening in the tree. We don't exactly, understand how it happens, but it's pretty cool stuff.
And then you kind of touched on it. So a tree does really well this season.
Yep.
And then, I'm gonna be all over on this one.
Yeah.
Because I just had I was in here with the Garden Guru, and we were talking about gardening journals and hunting journals. Yeah. There's got to be something like that in the tapped world. You've got to have like a tapped journal, sap journal, maple journal, maybe, or maybe it's just like stories. Or I know my cousin just like it's all like written inside of his the shack where he cooks.
Right.
Like you're in there for hours.
Right.
You're talking, you're BSing, and then you just start writing like notes from the seasons on the wall. So what does that look like? Have you?
Yeah. So we do it at kind of a broad scale. I think it's interesting. Every maple syrup maker I know has some version of this, you know, like their notes of what's going on. Mostly for us, it's at the level of how much sap have we collected out of which kind of sections of the sugar bush. And then the kind of cooking record of like when we're pulling syrup off and how much syrup is being produced. I've always wanted to do this, but to track individual trees. Like you have mental tracking of it.
Yeah.
Like we know certain trees are like every year they produce more sap than all the other ones. The
money trees.
And then there's, like you said, some that are, we tap them because we tap them, and then nothing's really going to happen. But I've never like documented that. And I've seen records of other people of like, and there's some like scientific research that's been done on individual trees. And we don't, there's a lot of factors going on. Dave Peterson, who's up in Elderon, he's like my, maple syrup elder. He's the maple syrup elder of the region.
Is he on? I was just gonna ask you, like, who's doing all this research?
Yeah. The best place to get research is kind of, unfortunately from my standpoint, because I think it should be in Wisconsin, but it's the Cornell Extension is kind of the best source of maple syrup research. And so you can find everything from them, like individual tree research, how big of tap holes should you put in a tree, how many taps should you put in a tree, all that kind of stuff. But Dave Peterson, he's been
just
making
blowing
syrup.
My mind. There's sugar maple research.
He's been making syrup for almost 70 years, or about 70 years, and he, at the beginning of this year, he said, I don't think it's going to be that great of a year, for two reasons. One, last summer was really cloudy, and so probably the trees didn't make as much sugar as they would have on a sunny year, and there's so much water that likely the sap will be diluted just because of the trees are able to just suck up as much water as they want. Yeah. We'll see if that plays out, but that's his kind of take on it, and he has some experience to back that up. And we saw it early on. The first run was really low in sugar content. It's come back up a little bit. We'll kind of see where it stays.
But that fluctuates. Solid.
Yeah,
but it's been a while. It's been a whole season since I've had.
Yeah, so I think that sap is about 3% sugar. So,
and what's average, or what's low, what's high?
Yeah, for sugar maple, generally I'd say we'd average about 2.5% sugar. Okay. It'll get down to 2 easily by the end of the season. We have one section of our sugar bush, we generally are closer to 3.54% almost on really good runs. And those seem like small percentage points, but they actually matter a huge amount. So the kind of easy calculation is to divide 88 by the percent sugar to give you the gallons of sap per sugar. So at 2%, you're at 40 gallons, 44 gallons of sap per gallon of syrup. Mm-hmm. And 3%, you're a little bit less than 30. So that's 10 gallons,
Difference.
10 gallons of sap that you don't have to boil off,
Yep.
at 3% sugar. So it's a pretty huge difference. So we definitely keep track of that, trying to see, and we don't necessarily do anything about it. There's nothing you can do about it. It's just nice to know, like, or is there a lot of sugar? We're gonna have to cook less this year or not?
Yeah, exactly. How many hours we got to spend in the cooker?
Yeah.
So I kind of want to touch on a couple of things with this.
Yeah.
Every maple syrup tapper has kind of their own journaling or their own form of writing down history.
Yeah.
And as a person who's educator, spent a lot of time working with people, now creating systems to better educate people, especially with like the outdoors. For yourself, like what does your own outlook on it mean? Like, so talking with the people that are older than you, your dad, your uncle, now with your kids and your family, what is your own like outdoor story or history look like, if that question makes sense?
Yeah. Related to maple syrup or just more general?
Just all of it, man.
Yeah, all of it.
Obviously maple syrup.
Yeah.
But because we're both syrup fiends. But
yeah.
No, you're a super well-read guy, and I just wanna hear your take on it.
Yeah. So this is kind of what I've spent my life thinking about in some ways and experiencing. But so, when I still to this point, when I think of home, I have a house here and a family here that are, obviously incredibly important. But when I think of home, I don't think of a house. I think of woods, right? And so that's, I grew up that way. And I've always been kind of a woods person. Like that's where I'm most comfortable, and that's how I identify. And that comes, that's a family history. That's how my dad and uncle grew up, and my grandpa. And so and through that experience, basically, I kind of came to this point of like having a deep connection to that place, but also having kind of a broader concern about the larger impacts on these natural places. I always knew I'd work in the environmental field and work on trying to ensure that we have wild places and access to the outdoors, basically. And the question that I came to along the way is, I grew up with a whole bunch of people who had very similar kind of experiences than I did, but our view on the world was very different. Theirs was kind of very extractive, like I go do whatever the hell I want to do. I'll shoot what I want. I'll, do whatever. And it's all there for me. It's mine. Versus my perspective is kind of like, this is an amazing place and we need to figure out how to take care of it. And there are all these like larger economic, social forces that are going against that, right? And so that question of like, how did I get to that point versus all these other people I grew up with that had the same experience. And so that's basically been, kind of my life work in a sense. And so
I just got goosebumps.
Yeah, nice. I don't know that I have great answers yet, but I know that,
and I don't think it's like pursuing perfection in a way. It's like, I don't think we'll ever have an answer. You just, it's the journey and the fact that that's the question. Like you arrived at is like, well, it's a process, and I see the value in it, and I'm going to devote my life to ensuring that other people experience what I experienced and what I'm still experiencing.
Yeah.
Because it's obviously still a huge part of, you're having a dinner out in the woods. Like it's still a huge part. You're sharing it with others, which is really cool.
Yeah. And that's, to me, kind of core of what Tapped is as a company, even, and what we love to do with maple syrup. I was even just kind of mentally tallying up all the people that have been out already this year. We've had, I don't know, probably 20 different people out to the Sugar Bush, doing different things already this year, which is awesome. That's part we really love. But yeah, I think you're right. It's, it's gone, that question has gone a ways back, I think to me, the kind of core people who've informed my thinking about it on the kind of literature side of things, you know, Wendell Berry and Aldo Leopold are kind of the old white guys that definitely I relate to well. But you know, this idea of how do we take care of the places that we love goes back a long time, and there's a lot of people have put good thought into it. And then there are people who are not writers, like my dad, who, you know, live this kind of on a daily basis, and Dave Peterson, and, you know, lots of other people are kind of making a living from the land and figuring out how to do that in an effective way that inform me as well. And, you know, and being a dad obviously is part of that, you know, like getting our kids out there. And I think there's this idea. So sense of place is kind of the core idea that I grapple with, and that my PhD work was on sense of place and food systems, and how sense of place motivated engagement, and then as people get engaged, how that kind of changes their sense of place, and they're more motivated to be involved. But the core idea, one of the core ideas in there is love, right? It kind of starts with an awareness and developing a love for a place and being connected to it, and that doesn't come from the issue standpoint. It's not about learning about climate change or you know, forest diseases or, you know, any of that stuff.
Yeah.
It comes from just being in a place and learning about what's going on there, and getting time there. And so that's always been kind of an interesting balance for me, right? It's like, because I know all the stuff that's going on, and that's what kind of motivates me, is like, how are we dealing with climate change, and how are we dealing with these major economic forces that are leading to more industrialization at the forestry level and the farming level. So we're getting larger, more intensive practices on the land. And I mean, all these things, that's like what freaks me out and what motivates me. But if you don't start with love, then none of that stuff really matters. Like, it's just too much to deal with and not particularly fun, right?
No, it's I mean, you're hitting on a huge point of it, and it carries over into so many things, like so many. And I love hearing it, because it's what is going to be required if we're going to make these changes to our existing systems that will, you know, carry the world, the land, for generations to come. It's the same thing Derek and I are talking about with upcoming wellness workshop. It's like, you can identify all of these areas of improvement in your life, like your diet, your sleeping, exercising, an injury. But if you don't come to that realization, you're doing all of these things that may be difficult, that are altering kind of the status quo, which for a lot of us sucks. We hate doing it. It's uncomfortable. But if you don't come to the realization you're doing it out of love for yourself, for your family, for your community, like that's where it all comes from, then it's going to be extremely difficult to do these things. You're most likely going to fail, and from that failure, instead of learning and continuing the process, you're just going to quit. Right. So I think what you're touching on is exactly right when it comes to our, you know, you mentioned Leopold talking about the land ethic, which is what you're, you know, it goes into everything from the, you know, tapping of maple trees to hunting, trapping, fishing, creating trails for people to access. Like, is that trail? Yeah, sure, it's going to be a great trail, but are you like dividing this area for the wildlife that would normally, you know, migrate through there? Things like that. If you don't come from a place of love, if it's just extraction, you're never going to hit on. So.
Exactly.
Oh man, got goosebumps again. I'm digging this. So, and then talking about, so how does all that play into the way you approached maybe education in the past, and now the way you kind of do what you do with systems?
I mean, it's really informed, I would say, everything I've done. And it's, you know, the kind of interesting thing for me is like, how do you find a job, in a sense, or a role that other people may have some idea of what that is, and kind of move it in a direction that I, feel comfortable doing. And so it's always kind of the underlying piece. And then I've, worked to kind of shift those organizations or roles into kind of meeting what I think is needed in the world, relative to those ideas. So, and that's interesting and challenging work, right? Because, I've always worked in like institutions in a sense, because that's where the resources are to do this work, right? It's, this is another tangent, but it's kind of fascinating. So there's this book called Orbiting the Giant Hairball. Orbiting the Giant Hairball, and actually came out of I think he was an artist working for a corporation. But the way I think about the giant hairball is bureaucracies, and particularly state and federal institutions that have resources, right, to do work, but the bureaucracies and corporations are these hairballs that if you're like really in them, you're just it's like grinding through things. And so I'd say my work is about how do we like access those resources and really kind of apply them to the community in ways that are beneficial, kind of extracting them from the bureaucracies, the hairballs. And it applies to the individual level of when you're working in a bureaucracy, how do you kind of navigate that in the way that you're not just stuck in it all the time, that you're out doing important work. And part of that hairball is kind of a culture, of like, this is the way we've always done things and we're going to continue to do them. And that doesn't work for me.
I was going to say, I don't think that flies with you.
Yeah, it doesn't, because it'd be fine if that was productive and good, but obviously
if we weren't faced with all these problems that we just discussed.
All the indications are it hasn't worked, right? So let's not keep doing that. So anyway, I would say that's kind of been the role I've played over the last 20 years of working in the field. And the older I get, the less patient I am with that kind of stuff. Is like we just need to be doing good work and connecting people to their places and getting people engaged. And so I just get less patient at this point, and I just want to be out doing that work. And interestingly enough, I mean, I think, and I would say probably I would be one of these people, or would have been one of these people 10 years ago or 20 years ago, would say, but you're running a maple syrup business, which is, a kind of side gig at this point. But I see Tapped as a way to address a whole bunch of things. Like it's good stuff, and sugar is the hook, and flavor is the hook. But it's really about, to me, community, that I talked about already. It's about how do we protect these lands, forest lands in particular, that are in family ownership, but those families are going through all kinds of transition, generational transition, scaling up in farm fields, all kinds of things that are happening where they're making decisions about, do we keep this land as forest or not? And Tapped is a brand and a company that can help them to make that decision in a way that I think is beneficial to keep forests. So as an example, just yesterday we bought sap from a neighboring farm, very similar kind of history to ours. Been in the Antigo area for 5 generations. It's being run by the youngest generation at this point, but they're potato farmers, dairy farmers, mostly dairy farmers, but they're kind of faced with this question of, do we, like everybody else, kind of round out the fields and open out the fields so we can get more irrigation in. And what's in the way right now are maple forests. And this, the youngest one said, I'd rather keep it as forest. Let's like tap the trees and see what we can do. And so we're able to support him in doing that, like making that decision and say, like, we can be economically beneficial for you, but you also have a community here that supports, that decision to do that.
That's awesome.
And so we're trying to expand Tap out in that way. Like it's a family business, but what we want it to be is a community business in a sense, that's able to support these small producers, give them another probably small stream of income, but another stream of income, and help them to make those decisions in a different way.
And it's probably more reliable than corn prices at this point.
Yeah, right. Yeah, for sure. And it's at a time where they're not able to do a bunch of other work too, right? So they're able to generate some extra income. And so I look at TAP as a way to, again, going back to that earlier question, to do that work as an educator and kind of community organizer that I wouldn't have, 20 years ago, I would have never thought of having a business to do that work. I would have always thought of it as, like I find a position that allows me to do that. And this allows me to, be less patient with your bureaucracies and just do what I think needs to be done.
You can avoid the red tape from a pre-existing system, and you'd be like, no, I'm just going to do it under this. This is my brand. Not only do we make kick-ass maple syrup infusions, but we also help spread, like we were talking about this entire time, the land ethic, the love, like help educate other people that there's basically you're limited by your imagination with what you're capable of or what you can do. So these farmers realize, oh yeah, we can, these trees are there. All we have to do is tap them, collect the sap, very little overhead, very little like investment of time or resources, where considering if you cut down the field, made it into pasture or a crop field, a lot more investment going on there. So no, it's super cool you've been able to do that.
Yeah, and as one of the things that's challenging for rural communities, I think, particularly in the upper Midwest, is kind of goes back to that. We're just gonna keep doing the same thing idea, right? Like this is how we've always done it. And when I was growing up in Antigo, this was very true, and I think it's still true to an extent today. Is like there's a bit of an aversion to being different or to something new, right? There's this very kind of not political but conservative, not a political conservative, but just a kind of work-related conservative. Like we just do what we do, and things that are different, they're a little sketchy. We're not sure about those, and so that tapped as a way to open that up a little bit too. Of like, I put crazy flavors in maple syrup. Like mostly when I meet people in Antigo now that I haven't seen for a while or that I'm just meeting, they're like, "Oh, you're the one who puts flavors in syrups." Like, yep, that's me. And at first I was kind of like, that's kind of weird, but really it's from my perspective, it's a recognition of like, oh, you're doing something kind of crazy and it seems to be working, right? There's like
genius. I love that idea.
Innovation without being in the face of like, you have to change. Like I'm not telling anybody they have to do anything. It's kind of like, we're going to be creative about what we do, and you can see if it works or not, and so I think that's it's pretty interesting kind of how things play out that way, and the thinking about that as a way to influence communities and build kind of the potential for innovation in dealing with the new world we're in. I can't say that 10 years ago I had figured that out. I mean, it's just kind of happening.
It's that journey we've been talking about.
Yeah, for sure.
So we're gonna bounce back talking about influence from your family, like the people that kind of your dad, your grandpa, your uncle, kind of like what. So I guess the question I want to get to is you're an educator, you're a father too. When growing up for going out in the woods with my dad, I always enjoyed it up until a point, and that point was kind of. And I think you kind of touched on it. Like we came to these different realizations early on with like our outdoor experience, and what we were taking from it wasn't always actually physical extraction. It was more of this like existential or like like a philosophy or outlook on it. And love my dad to death, and he's even changing because him and I have been having these conversations. But it became not enjoyable. I was also, this is where I found soda in my life because I've worked I've always had expendable income because I've always been working, like side jobs from like 10.
Yeah.
Soda, getting out of shape, overweight, that kind of thing obviously kept me out of the woods as well, because if you want to actually enjoy your time in the woods, you need to have a prerequisite level of fitness. There's a reason why you go out west and like those guys might like eat like crap, smoke cigars or cigarettes, but they'll hike your ass off because that's just what they do.
Right.
But for you growing up, was there like things that you loved about going out with them, things that you didn't enjoy, and then kind of taking from that how you parent your own children? Because you seem like a very introspective parent educator.
Yeah, I am that for better or worse. Yeah, I mean, so there were definitely those times and kind of inflection points in my experience, and a lot of them are around deer hunting, right? And so like deer hunting, we stayed at a cabin on our land, you know, it was like a mile and a half from the farm, but it was like a whole different world. Like, you know, escaped into there, and we went. I loved the seasons where we went in on Friday night and never came out until the end of season, right? And so I always loved that experience, but and we had a, you know, pretty big crew of guys, family and friends, and all, you know, great people. But the like almost competitive nature of it, and the just kind of extractive nature that focused a lot around language in particular, of just like killing stuff and you know, like, you know, going out to get stuff, like really started to wear on me kind of in high school, and it came to a head a couple of times that I quit hunting for a while because I was like, this isn't for me. And there was the emotional side of killing an animal that I was, you know, still trying to figure out, but a lot of it was the kind of cultural side of like, I couldn't deal with my emotions in the setting that didn't recognize that was at all something you did, right? And so I walked away from that somewhere actually in college is when it kind of fully came to a head. And there was a time where I actually thought I was going to stop hunting, and then we got into quality deer management, which I thought early on was going to kind of bring in an ethical kind of piece to it, and then it just
because QDM. I was just listening to some friends talk about this. QDM almost should be like, the deer part should be environment management, or like like, because that's, if you actually like read QDM's website, it's actually more about the environment. What are you doing to better the deer? Like their quality of life. Not what I think most people think of quality deer management, where they're just like, oh, big bucks, deer everywhere.
And so that like prolonged my kind of involvement, and then it didn't, you know, it played out into that of like, oh, it's just about huge bucks and we're going out to kill them all and blah 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 blah. And there was also, you know, along with that, this is the other fascinating thing to me, and I was just having a conversation actually with Joe Thompson about this. There's also, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier, there's a sense of ownership that comes along with that those are my deer, that I fully have control over and a right to, regardless of what's happening. And the one thing that really got to me and still gets to me is this idea that because that's my deer, if anything else kills that thing, it's wrong. Like the wolf eating a deer is somehow a personal insult, taking something away from me personally because I own that thing. But no, you didn't. That was never yours. And so a wolf eating a deer is nothing against you, and you can't think of kind of natural processes and things that you don't own as being taken from you, right? And so that whole, you know, the culture around anti-wolves and anti-everything predators definitely contributed to me kind of, you know, stepping away. And then so the thing that brought me back to hunting was actually our son, who my dad continued to hunt, and we had a lot of kind of discussions along the way of why I wasn't hunting, and I think it was kind of hard on him in some ways.
Oh yeah.
But he also understood. I mean, I remember him even when I was like avid in hunting. I remember him letting some deer go by, and I was like, well, like, why didn't you shoot it? And he's like, I just didn't feel like it. And I was like, oh, well, that's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
But it was never like obviously there was an underlying emotional part to it, but we didn't talk about that part.
No.
So he did understand, that I was kind of struggling with that, but it was hard. But when our son got to be a little bit older, that's what brought me back in of like, he's interested. I want that to be a good experience for him. And that connection, I never got to hunt with my grandpa. My grandpa died before I was born. But that opportunity for, my son and my dad and I to be together,
that's awesome.
Definitely drove that. And so, I've tried to, be open and kind of forward with the emotional side of that. And, he's 16, going to be 16 now. So it's not like, that's the forefront of what is going through him right now. But we've definitely dealt with that kind of side. The first year that he got a deer, we went through a little ritual around like, what is it to kill an animal, and what do we do with this, and just we talked through like how he was feeling and all that stuff, which
I love it.
We never did. No one would have ever done that with me.
First animal I shot, I was 6.
Yeah.
We were out rabbit hunting with my dad, and I never knew my grandpa growing up.
Yeah.
My dad's uncle, so my grandma's brother, is out there with us, and he literally just like put a gun on my hand.
Yeah.
Shoot that porcupine.
Yeah.
Shot the porcupine. Like, I'm 6. There's you can't understand anything at that point. I work with 6-year-olds.
Yeah, right.
And it was only like the next day my grandma found out and was like, "What? Why would they do that?" And then talking to me, and you understand the gravity of the situation.
Yeah.
Yeah. So no, having someone there to kind of like talk you through it, and like you are taking a life.
Yeah.
Like that's something that kind of bugs me too, is like I love hunting, love trapping, obviously love having dogs, pets, and then when people are just like, well, it's only this.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just like, what do you no, man, everything that's alive has worth, or deserves like being treated well, and being acknowledging, especially when we're taking that life. Yeah. So no, I love it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, some people probably think this gets a little weird, but I mean, the same is true with trees from my perspective. Like I've cut a lot of trees down in my life, but it's interesting. Like the fascinating part of it is like how do you love something and kill it at the same time?
Yeah, right.
And so that's
it's when you mentioned trees, there was we had a giant blanking on the name. They get what's the little beetle thing?
Oh, ash
tree, yeah. So giant ash tree in my backyard growing up. Huge. Like that thing had so many damn leaves. Like it would be fun to play with in the fall, and then you'd realize, shit, we have to break these up.
Right. Let's work.
And no, when we had to we cut that tree down because it got the rot in the inside, so we were cutting it down. Tornado came through the very next year in Merrill, and I'm pretty sure that tree would have been on the house.
Yeah, right.
But when we had to cut that tree down, it was like emotional.
Yeah.
Just like all the memories, what that tree provided, what it like when there's the in Sand County Almanac when they're sawing through the tree and they're seeing the rings, you can kind of like you get the mental pictures and the images. So what you're saying totally makes sense.
Yeah. And related to maple syrup. One of the interesting things to me about maple syrup is like it's and this relates to hunting too, and probably why I stayed involved in hunting a little bit longer with quality deer management is that it shifted to more kind of observation, like you're at least making decisions. And with trees, like it's making maple syrup in a sugar bush gets you to kind of recognize and kind of analyze the individual differences of trees in a lot of ways. It's like you're trying to, in some ways it's a very mechanical thing. You're trying to figure out where to put a hole in a tree. But to me, it's like, you're trying to read that tree and kind of respond to the situation it's in. And so you get to know individual trees in that way, which is fun for me. And then it's the most work. I mean, tapping trees is a lot of work, and then but the most work is hauling sap for us, because we do buckets, right? And I was out yesterday hauling sap, and it's everybody I was with, I told, like, this is the most fun part for me, because like it's kind of like it's almost like hunting and trapping, where the expectation, you're like walking up to a tree, you don't exactly know how much sap is going to be in there, and you open up the lid and you're like, oh my god, that's a lot of sap in there, you know. And so for me, that's like every tree, hundreds of trees, I get to do that, you know, when I'm collecting sap. And then just the like physical work, like, just puts you, you know, you're in a zone, in a sense. You're just in that moment of, you know, responding to what that tree has done, collecting sap and hauling, you know. And it's just a very physical kind of direct
the work
connection.
Reward type thing going on.
Yeah, exactly.
I never even kind of put those two and two together, but yeah, that's it makes sense. Like the syrup, hunting, gathering, trapping. Right. Even when you mentioned you know, cutting a tree down and how hunting are similar, and I'm like, yeah, like we love forests, we love deer. I love watching deer, like your trail camp pictures you put up all winter. That I love seeing those pictures. And even trees, like pictures of trees are awesome, or like the perfect picture of just a tree, like all the characteristics. And then, but also being able to kill that deer or cut that tree down because you know it's for the good of the herd. Like from a management standpoint, there's the carrying capacity of the land, or you recognize the fact that this tree is on its way out, and if we allow it to stay here, we're limiting these other trees that are coming up. The tree potentially rots, we lose it, where if we cut it down now, we can actually use it for boards or what have you. Oh man, that's a heavy it's a heavy topic right there.
That was a deep one.
I love it.
It's good.
Coming back to actually, I want to touch on trapping for a bit. Now that I have you here, because trapping is, and I talked with this AJ from Project Upland was in Point a few weeks ago at university, and he was talking about how do we make hunting cool? How do we make the outdoors cool? And trapping is definitely one of those loaded topics, because as you and I both know, there's very barbaric and primitive kind of aspects to it compared to what people are used to nowadays. And I've had many conversations with people who I'll post to social media, trapping, blah, 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 and they're coming from their perspective, experiences, and backgrounds. Maybe they've seen an injured dog from poorly placed traps, or people who just trap and then never go collect them, or they're trapping in areas where they should not be trapping. You're always going to have stupid people making stupid decisions. But I think I see trapping as a valuable tradition, skill. Makes you super knowledgeable of what we've been talking about, the land, the animals, because especially if you have to find where these animals are, note their patterns, note the land, and then somehow get them to step in a 1 inch to 4 inch square. So and coming back to like the value of life and all those things we've been talking about, and I've had these conversations with people where, how can you trap? Blah, blah, it's unethical. It's you don't need to do it, and then I'll just look at them and be like, you have leather on your shoes. Like, where do you think that leather comes from? Or the leather in your car? Or let's go back to the shoes. You buy new running shoes every 3-4 months. Is that just the leather tree? Like, do we grow leather? Like, no, you've had to kill something. Something died for your shoes. You may not, and I always love it when it's someone who's comes from, like, I'm the vegan, I'm the plant-based diet person from an ethical standpoint. I understand that, but then don't wear leather running shoes.
Yeah.
You have to invest in something else because something is still dying.
Yeah.
So that's always a fun conversation where I'm like, I love doing it because I get to go out in the woods. I'm interacting with my dad, especially like the family aspect of it, the tradition, and a lot of the places we go to, we're going because we talk to the DNR like, hey, we need to get these beaver trapped out of there because they're ruining this area of the woods needs to be logged off. Like that's how we get money to pay for the public land or goes towards it. So there's a reason for a lot of it, and I also understand like it's a lot to wrestle with for someone to like think about that. But I guess I'm just curious what your thoughts are about the whole thing.
Yeah, it's an interesting one for sure. And I definitely understand the people who are opposed to it and don't do it.
Yeah,
and I think
it's not for everyone.
Yeah, I think it is true. Like none of us live an innocent life, right? There's continuously, unfortunately, things dying for us, and we have such a disconnect from that, I think is the challenge. And, whether it's leather shoes or, my blue jeans or whatever, it's, there's life connected to that's been taken. And I think one of the arguments for, hunting and trapping are to re-engage with life and to actually know what that is. Like this idea that you can, completely kind of distance yourself from the life cycle and kind of in a sense like force other people to do your dirty work for you, I think is part of the challenges we have, with broader environmental issues, is that it's just not, we don't have a basic understanding of what it means to live in the world, right? In relation to the rest of life. So I think, that's a case for it. I think the one thing like about trapping for me is like I could never go back to it on the kind of larger scale, like just large scale trapping for fur, where you're, just trying to get as many of everything as you can. That would be really hard for me.
I'm not judging because we wouldn't be here where we are without trapping large scale, which is crazy to think about. Like that's literally why we society, culture, people came here was trapping. Yeah, for better or worse, right? Yeah.
And all the impacts on Native Americans through that process. But we're built on the back of those people in a lot of ways, and on their societies. But so that's a little bit of a different kind of question to me. And I understand, like at some point in my life, I would have loved to have been able to make a living doing that. I mean, so I understand
mountain man living.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think it's like anything, to me, it's about the ethic of it, of like, are you trying to do it in the best way that you can? Are you valuing that life that you're taking and, respecting it? And are you trying to, minimize the broader impacts, like catching someone's dog, obviously, like, are you being ethical in kind of your broader approach to it? And, like we were talking about, just when we got in, that you still had some beaver meat, that you're eating, so that it's not just about one single use of it. I mean, there's fur, which is generally what we think about as trapping, but the access to food, and I mean, to me, that's an incredibly ethical kind of approach to eating. It's like I'm getting this food, right? And I'm not harming a broader population or a broader natural system. So yeah, but it's just a hard one to wrestle with. I mean, early on I stopped trapping predators just because I couldn't emotionally deal with that. It's like, that's just too much. Like, and it, I guess in some ways I don't know, just the intelligence of those critters just, it was like too much for me to deal with.
Oh, every time I see one, I see like dog, like, and I give it human characteristics because of, well, I do that with every animal, like the deer I hunt. Like, if I sit in my tree stand and I have to watch, and especially if I'm how full is the freezer at home? Because obviously I'm out deer hunting for sustenance, but like the longer I watch an animal, the less I want to end up wanting to shoot it. It's like, damn it, but coyotes, wolves, anything like that, I'm always like, shit. It's an intelligent animal.
Yeah, right.
Just trying to survive out here. Like,
right, yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's an interesting one. I've had lots of conversations with a lot of people around that too when I was more involved, and I definitely understand their take on it. And I think it's, just to me, the shared value and shared interest there is life, right?
Yep.
And if we can all come to that point of like, yes, all life is valuable. None of us are innocent kind of in that relationship. And the best we can do is be as ethical and kind of open-minded in recognizing the value of those larger systems, natural systems and processes. I think that's our way forward with it. And there are a whole range of individual responses to that, right? Some of us are going to engage in getting our own food in a variety of different methods. Some of us are going to say, I can't do that, but I at least want to know that my animal that I'm eating or wearing on my feet or is in my car was raised well and taken care of in the process. So
for sure, man. I love it. So we'll bring this full circle because I don't want us to run out of time.
Yeah.
Coming back. So and this has all just been that conversation you talked about what Tapped is.
Yeah.
It's just like this bigger conversation. When you talked about you meet someone back in Anago and they're like, you're the guy that does the weird stuff with the syrup.
Yep.
Like, no, it's an awesome start to conversation for change, for trying new things. Maybe not changing, but just trying new things, constantly evolving.
Yep.
Let's go back to Tapped. Where did that all start?
Yeah, so I mean,
as a business.
Yeah, as a business. So when we moved back to Wisconsin from Oregon, we started getting back involved in maple syrup, and I've always wanted to be connected again to that land, but also find a way that we can make sure that we can sustain it into the future, and that my kids have the same options that I have had or have. And so, we got more involved in maple syrup process. We started selling a little bit of maple syrup, and then just to friends, and started playing around with these infusions. And then 2 years
crazy wizard. What was the first one? What were you like?
Ginger. I think ginger was the first one.
Okay.
And I'm pretty sure Abby, my wife, saw some mention of it somewhere. I mean, I've always been maple syrup crazy. Like maple syrup's all over the place.
Same. It's everywhere.
And
I buy either the half gallon or the gallon.
Yeah, nice. And we like people like you.
Like when I go somewhere and like this one, what do we got here? 16 ounce. Like that's their largest syrup. I'm like, how do you live?
Yeah.
Like I understand the infused ones.
Yeah, right.
But I'm like, how do you wait?
What do you do with it? You just smell it every once in a while, or what?
A little tablespoon, like is it cough syrup? I can put it in everything.
Yeah.
Cocktails, cook with it.
Yeah.
Pancakes, waffles, obviously, eggs.
Yeah.
Make tea with it.
Yeah. It's amazing on yogurt. I love. Like,
I was gonna say Greek yogurt.
Yeah.
A good Greek yogurt, maple syrup.
Yeah.
What else do I throw in there? Some blueberries or something.
Yeah. Perfect.
Sweet.
So Tapped has been around for a couple of years now, and I mean, in a lot of ways, we had the idea of Tapped. Worked with some folks on campus. A good friend of mine, Matt Groshek, kind of helped us with some kind of design stuff to push us along, and then actually Greg here at the Idea Center pushed us quite a bit by getting us into the Hatch business competition, and that pushed us in a kind of uncomfortable way, which would ultimately be good.
That's what we've been talking about.
Yeah, like you gotta jump into this more. And so the last couple of years have been pretty exciting and fun. I mean, we've grown incredibly just with the amazing partners that we're working with around the state, restaurants and bars and retail places and coffee shops, and it's been fun. And again, to me, I mean, that community aspect of it is fun, you know, getting to know different people and thinking about how it can be used.
Yeah.
And I just, I mean, I don't even know how many ideas I have for maple syrup related products, but a lot, like hundreds maybe. But one of them is some of this comes out of accidents, right? But some of it, there's some intention to it. But this one is an accidental one. We had some syrup ferment last year, and it was usually in the process, we take the syrup off of the cooker, off the evaporator, just before its syrup stage, put it in a barrel, and then reheat it and filter it and kind of make sure everything's at the right sugar content for syrup. But we like missed a barrel that we hadn't completely finished off, and it fermented. But my dad's like, are we just gonna dump this out? And I'm like, I don't think we should dump it out. Like, we have to figure out, like, there's something interesting about this. And so for the last year almost, I've been like talking to people like, what the hell am I going to do with fermented syrup? Like, there's an interesting kind of flavor to it. It's like, did an initial ferment and then kind of stopped. I've looked into maple vinegars. So there are a couple places that are doing maple vinegars, which it requires a more diluted solution. Like, that's already fermented. I can't do it with that. And just this morning, I got an email from one of our partners down in southeastern Wisconsin. It was like, I think we got a use for it. Like, it's going to go into a cocktail. And so I get super excited about stuff like that. Of just like, it's not, you know, I have some initial ideas, but those get developed in partnership with a whole bunch of other people that we, you know, work with. And so that part of Tapped has been really fun. And just, where do we go? You know, even like our new flavors that are coming out this year, hops and hibiscus, you know, that's been an ongoing conversation for a couple of years of like, what's going on, like, flavor wise, that looks interesting. And talking with bartenders and chefs, and like, where should we go and what should we try? And so there was a laundry list of things to try, and a bunch of them were really good, but these two kind of rose to the top. So it's all a community effort. You know, it's not Tapped isn't just ours. You know, it's a broader effort there. So that part's really fun.
The hops one is awesome.
Yeah,
I love it.
We're excited about that one. It's a crazy one. You know, it's like. A lot of people are like, what? That's like hops. Like, you're putting beer in maple syrup? I'm like, yeah, pretty much. Like,
well, I've been putting maple syrup in beer for a long time. So,
that's right, yeah.
Because we always make a nut brown ale, and then we so basically instead of priming sugar, we use maple syrup. Yeah. To finish it before we bottle. Yeah. And then it gives, like, everyone that's drank it loves it. It's got great flavor, but because maple syrup it's not as like equal as sugar. Yeah. One bottle could be like champagne and blow up in your face, and then the other bottle is like perfectly good beer. Yeah. So I'm always hesitant to like give it out as a gift because I'm like, I should probably be there because this person isn't going to be ready for what happens. Right. Yeah. Yeah. One of the really things I'm really excited about for the Tappening is that my brother-in-law is starting a brewery. He's in Green Bay called Cocoon Brewing. Okay. And so he's made a maple beer. It's a stout that made with our maple syrup and then is aged in a Great Northern Distilling whiskey barrel that we aged our maple syrup in, and I gave it to him that he's put the beer in. So that'll get unveiled. That'll be phenomenal.
Next week. Yeah. So it's gonna be pretty cool. Pretty fun stuff. So I mean, it's just. I think we're just barely scratching the surface, especially in the Midwest, of like what we're doing with maple syrup. The East is Vermont, New York are a little bit ahead of us as far as like how broadly used and how much diversity there is in maple syrup products. But we're getting there, and you know we're excited to be leading that in some ways at least. And so there's so much potential and so many kind of crazy things that are going to come out in the next few years that I'm excited about. You know, one of the conversations that you and I started connected about, and I've had with a few folks, is maple syrup as essentially a sports nutrition. Right? And so I've been talking with some endurance bike racers who have used all kinds of products in the past for energy boosts during the course of races. But they're all, I mean, you don't even know what's in that stuff. You know, it's like a whole bunch of list of complex chemicals that are in there. And so maple syrup does what those things do, but it's real food, it's locally produced, has a bunch of added benefits of antioxidants and electrolytes, and it tastes good. You know,
and the beautiful thing about sap maple syrup is it's a native species. We're not having, so like cane sugar, corn syrup, you have to destroy what's naturally occurring and put in this fake monocrop and add all this other extra bullshit, time, money, you know, bringing in fertilizer, pesticides, blah, 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 blah. The list goes on. Maple tree, you just go out in spring and you tap it and you collect it and boom, here we go. It's natural. It's the natural word. I was talking with Tony and we were laughing and bullshitting because it's obviously a bastardized word at this point. But maple syrup, coming back to like local, it's sustainable, it's naturally occurring in this area. Why not use it to do all these awesome things instead of, once again, the corn syrups, the cane sugars? Like it's not as sustainable always relying on those things and then always doing it because, once again, that's the way it's been done. And now you're kind of getting the conversation started about changing that, which is awesome. So, and
you know, the added benefit is the flavor is amazing, right? It's good stuff. So it's like, it's such an easy kind of step to take. You know, it's like so many benefits, and it's good. I mean, it's like
just tastes
win-win-win all the way around, you know.
Cool, man.
Pretty awesome.
So we'll get you rolling out of here so you're on time for your meeting. Where do we even want to go with this? So for people looking to get not only involved in Tapped or come check out the farm, but just like, because I think we've been talking about it, getting outdoors, getting involved, you know, with home, the woods. What do you tell people that are just looking to get started? They've been in their urban environment and kind of want to get back to not living in the woods, not going up like a full Walden, but just, what do you tell those people, or kind of message for them?
I mean, I think one is, I mean, just do it for yourself. I mean, it's fun and it's easy, and I mean, you're just gonna feel better and be happy about it, right? So it's a selfish act in a sense, and a really important selfish act. And start wherever is easy, right? So, you know, like Stevens Point, we're, you know, have incredibly fortunate to have parks all over the place. You know, Iverson is probably my favorite urban park, and one of my favorite in the country, actually. But it's easy, just, you know, start 15, 30 minutes, you know, whatever you have, lunch break, a morning walk, an evening walk. I think that's the place to start. And there's, you know, I mean, everywhere you go for sure, but definitely in central Wisconsin, Stevens Point. I mean, there are tons of communities around you that are, you know, interested in kind of connecting with other people and being outside. So you can find a variety of groups or individuals that, you know, are willing to help you out and do anything, whether that's, you know, just getting out and going for a walk, going for a hike, or fishing or hunting or whatever it might be that's of interest. You can, you know, find help and support there. And I think and sometimes it's intimidating to get started with something, kind of from the standpoint of like, people are going to judge me as a newbie and I don't know, but you know, in this community in particular, that's not going to happen. No. You know, it's like people just are excited that someone else is interested in what they're interested in.
Like, here, this is where I screwed up. Let's see if you can avoid those things.
Yeah, exactly. And, but yeah, I mean, one of the things that we try and do as a family, even though we have, it seems like we would probably be outside all the time, but we get stuck in these ruts too, in winter, or crazy things going on with the family. But we try at least every day to be outside for 30 minutes. Whatever it is, the kids get to choose what they want to do. So that, like, setting that goal of 30 minutes a day of taking that time, and once you're, it's even amazing for me at times where there'll be a couple of days where I just am socked in with work and all kinds of stuff, and I don't get out, and I'm like, I really should go for a walk or do something. Yeah. And it's kind of I'm kind of dragging myself to get there, and then I get there, I'm like, why was this at all like a duty that I felt I had to fulfill? It's like, I feel awesome being out here, so once you get into it, it's easy to keep going. But all kinds of opportunities. And I mean, people who are interested in the maple syrup process or what we're doing out at the farm, they're always welcome. So they can get a hold of us through our Facebook page and message us there, or go on to tapmaplesyrup.com, and our email and phone and everything is there. So we're always happy to show people around, put people to work.
There you go. That's what I was thinking.
Happy to
buckets.
do that. Yep, we're happy to have people carry buckets, haul wood. There's always work to do. So
I like it.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool, man. Yeah. What are your favorite maybe wildlife or environmental kind of nonprofit organizations, or maybe educational organizations where people can find out more? Yeah.
So I guess a few places to start. This one's more food related, but I'm particularly connected to Farm Shed as a.
We didn't even. Damn it! That was the other thing I wanted to talk to you about. We didn't even have time. We'll get back to
do that again. So Farm Shed is the local foods organization in Central Wisconsin that we created about 10 years ago now, a little bit over 10 years ago. So that's a good place to get started with all food related things.
That itself is such a crazy organization.
Yeah, it's amazing. There's a lot of story there.
You were one of the original?
Yeah.
The OGs?
Yep. Yeah, there were a handful of us that had some crazy ideas to
I can't even
try and pull it off.
Damn it, we didn't have time for that one today. We can dive it. Talk away though. We'll come back.
Yeah, we'll come back to it. But yeah, I mean, it's just an amazing organization. Lots of great ways to get involved, and for those of us who've been involved in Farm Shed, whether it's been for a week or for a decade, what it comes down to again is community. Like that Farm Shed in a lot of ways defines my community and my social community, right? And who I get to hang out with, and who I'm excited to see, and all of that. So it does amazing work, but the community aspect of it is incredibly important and amazing. So that's a good place to start. I think Aldo Leopold Audubon Society here in Stevens Point is an amazing organization. Do great field trips and get people out. Good connection to environmental issues that are going on. One of the other organizations in the state that I really love is the Aldo Leopold Foundation, and the center that they have down by Baraboo is an incredible place to visit.
Just got down there finally last year.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
Yeah, and get to go to the shack is amazing.
And you see the old pictures of what that place looked like when they first got it. It's just a chicken coop and barren wasteland. Talking about what we talked about earlier, extraction, just like take. And now you go there, you're like, this is not the same place.
Yeah, exactly.
Not the same place.
Yeah, so that's, carrying on that work is incredibly important, and the organization does an amazing job of that, and so that's a really important one. I mean, one of the newer ones that you're involved with, the Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, I think is doing really incredible work. Really supportive of that effort of protecting public lands and protecting access. I think from a kind of very broad-based approach, that is a place where a lot of different interests can come together. So, so those are some cool places to start. Love for sure. It. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, anything else? Where can people get tapped?
Oh yeah. Well, if you're in Stevens Point, it's in a lot of places.
Yeah, it is.
Pretty much anywhere you go. The Stevens Point Co-op, Mission Coffee, Agro Market, the Bottle Stop, Market on Strongs. Hopefully I got everybody in there. I think that's just about everybody.
Sounds
But
about right.
if you go to the website, you can track down. There's a list of all the places that we have it in the state. So that's probably easiest. Oh, actually, Ruby Coffee and Zest both do some drinks with Tapped in it as well. So those are good places to stop. Coffee shops are one of our favorite places to work with. They're doing some cool stuff with maple syrup drinks there, and Sweet Time up in Anigo is doing some cool stuff. And so yeah, but going to the website, checking out the Facebook page, the easiest way to kind of get connected. There is an online store there as well. People can order directly from there, and we'll do once we get through the season, we'll do a release. Kind of people can order locally direct from us if they just want to pick up from us too. So all kinds of places, we'll make it as easy as possible to get tapped for sure.
Sweet. Social medias?
Yeah. Facebook and Instagram.
Facebook, Instagram, Tapped maple syrup at both of them.
Yeah.
Cool.
I think that's true.
All right. Yeah, I was
I'm pretty sure that's right. Yeah. Cool.
Nice, man.
All right.
Thanks again for coming on.
Yeah, it was awesome.
This was
Thank
fun.
you. Yeah,
Enjoyed
it's
the
good
hell
to
out
talk
of
with you. Yeah.
Boom.
Cool.
See you.